Hi everyone. Uh, so the topic that I'm intending to cover today is Model Context Protocol. In short, we call it MCP. This is being lately released in market and it's being used very widely. Primarily in a layman term, we can say it's a protocol that used to set standards how an LLM should interact across the AI agents or beat external data sources. Now the topic that I'm solely intending to address here will explain how we can integrate the Cloud LLM with the GitHub tool to demonstrate the use case of MCP that I'll be using interchangeably with the term model. Go ahead and through the code. I would like to set the background so it will easy for us to map how the code eventually is doing and what we are attaining by using MCP protocol. As we see, we can visualize MCP as an open standard. If you see here, we can specify it as an open standard that enables our model, be it Cloud A, Gemini, Chat GPT, to interact dynamically with the external tool, database, or API through a standardized interface. We can, or a pattern, we can extend our existing architecture that deals or talk with any LLM suite or any LLM model with any sort of external tools. We can visualize it. We intend to talk to any database or any external API or any other repository or any proprietary software, any proprietary endpoint that we cannot as such make it available publicly. So if you see the architecture down here, it's more MCP will have one MCP client that is nothing but our tool, or you can say any prompt. Then we'll have MCP host, and then we'll be having an MCP server. To break it down, MCP server is nothing but something that defines how to resolve the context of a question being asked by the user through a prompt. What it means is MCP server would have a capability to determine a question being asked for which particular target resource. Has it been a question that is asked with respect to Git, for example, with the GitHub, or be it with something to deal with the database or with other API. So how the delegation is done by using the MCP server. And that delegation is eventually done to the tool that will be fetching the data what a user looking for. Tool can be anything something that integrates the user input with the backend data that we need to fetch across and send it back to the client. Now, if you see here, in this example, we'll be dealing with a UI. UI means a customer prompt where I'll be asking question with respect to a PR. I'll be giving a PR, the pull request against the GitHub repository, and I would ask LLM to go and analyze the PR. Having said that, an LLM will have capability to understand I have been asked a question to deal with a pull request with respect to the GitHub. Now, to which GitHub it intend to go and how you should navigate. That is something that would be defined as a part of tool. So the chronology of the whole MCP integration with the GitHub goes in this way. Very first time, when the user is going to give the prompt, give a question, the question, for example, that he want to analyze, user is expected to give a PR link, and he'll have a statement, please analyze the below PR, and he'll give a PR link. So it will fetch details. Once the detail would be fetched using the tool, it would be analyzed using the Cloud Desktop application, which is nothing but an LLM suite because it already has a context. The only thing it's lacking is the exact data that it needs to work on, or that it needs to frame the answer for, that is to be rendered to the client. That would be done in turn, would be done by the MCP tool, that is GitHub in our case. And once we get the response, it will generate the review summaries as per its intelligence, inbuilt intelligence of any LLM suite. Here we are using Claude Desktop. And reviews will be saved to Notion. Notion AI is another AI tool that used to deal with multiple LLM behind the scene. And it's a standard repository to hold different integration that is being done with the LLMs. When we go down, we see how at a high level MCP works. First of all, how it navigates from bottom to up approach. If you see, MCP format would be done means we have put a question in a prompt, then it go to MCP server, it determines the context, it will say I have been asked the question related to PR. Then it will go to source code in the GitHub. How it will go to the source code? It will go based on the tool that will be defining as a part of MCP server, wherein we'll be specifying the GitHub specific token that will allow us an access. That is something, a pre-configured thing. That is the only thing we are expecting the developer to do from the authorization point of view, specifying the API key. Then it will get the commit messages based on the intelligence of the LLM itself. And once we'll get the additional context from the Cloud LLM. We are enriching Cloud with the information very precisely with what we fetch from the GitHub. So this is how it goes. First of all, we'll initialize the integration, means we are defining in GitHub API key so that it's able to get the context whenever we are putting a question from the prompt. Then based on get the context, it will go to the particular GitHub that is specified as a tool. It will pull the request, it will analyze, and it will give the suggestions based on the LLM. And how it will help? It will help us to increase the productivity, because LLM is getting enriched with the time about the standards, and it can do the analysis in a very profound way. That is something we are offloading work from the developer. So what are the steps involved here? You have to do the set of integrations. As a prerequisite, we'll be defining the GitHub. In a GitHub repository, we'll be fetching the access token. Then we'll fetch the Notion credentials. In order to fetch the GitHub, if you see how generally it's being done. If you go into one of the examples here, we see under our settings will be under developer, you'll be able to get the GitHub token. Under developer setting, we'll get our tokens. And for the Notion, we'll be getting the, once we log in, we get the integration. There will specify the integration. And when we specify integration, it will generate us a token and will just enable the content capabilities. In this, we are determining the context for two of our service. One is Notion AI, and one is GitHub. So these are the prerequisites. Once we got and also one more thing is here, we'll be getting the API key that is being hidden here, but this would be used here for integration. That will come in the later stage. First, we'll set up all dependencies. First of all, we'll be creating the virtual environment. There will activate the virtual environment to segregate the global environment dependencies to the local context. Then we'll get requirements txt file, and we'll be installing all the requirements with the specified version. As we see here, I've already created one and executed after creating the environment. As we see here, created the environment UV using virtual, then move to that environment, and then after activating that, I'll be installing all the requirements defined in the packages. So it resolved and installed 36 packages in total. Then that includes the packages related to request that we'll be using to make the API call to the GitHub repo. And we have a Notion client that will be used to define the context for Notion AI, based on which our LLM would be able to get the context from the MCP server. That will come to that later. Now, for now, once we're done with installation, the next step, as I just mentioned, we have to integrate with the GitHub, getting the GitHub token. Next, we'll be getting the API key, as we just discussed, from the Notion AI. Then we'll be creating an environment variable where we specify our key token and the page ID. And eventually, we'll be dealing with the two Python files here. One would be that chronologically, we need to run the integration of GitHub Python first. That will define the integration of GitHub. Means it will register using our GitHub token, the PR that we intend to use against our prompt, or we can say the repo against which we have created a PR that we want an LLM to analyze using the cloud and GitHub integration. If we break down this particular file here, github.integration Python, the very first time will be whenever we'll be integrating, we are using request API that will define the headers, and subsequent it will get the file changes basically done to the PR as a part of PR. Once this integration is done, then is the major part wherein we are defining the servers. We are doing nothing specifically, but we are using MCP, fast MCP. So based on the name itself, it is able to get the context for the GitHub PR analysis. It's smart enough LLM to get the context. However, the major issue comes in, let's see, the LLM know I need to do the analysis, but to which repo? How it will figure that out? In order to do that, we see the order. First of all, we are initializing, defining the context, and then we are initializing the external tools that or the sources that we want to work against. As we initially told, it's a Notion AI and GitHub, so we register both. You see the full-fledged code what we actually doing here in. Whenever we are loading the environment, after that, sorry, the below one, here's the complete code. In the order, first of all, once we are done with loading the environment, we'll be initializing the Notion AI, then we'll be registering the tools. This is the point basically where we are registering our MCP tools. Whenever the question is being asked, LLM review me the PR, it will come to this tool. Based on that, it will say, I intend to use this. Here it gets the context. And based on this, since we already done the integration, the MCP server, it's able to determine is the server. Again, it will respond it back to the LLM. And LLM will make the eventual call to the GitHub and will get the response. Here we have registered one, we are registering the tools. In the sequence, we register the MCP tool. And here we have registered the Notion, initialize the Notion AI. So we can see here, we have the breakup done. And in order to run the MCP server, we use this method, self MCP runs studio. And you see here, we have run this Python analyze file and it initializes the PR review. The same we can see here, I've already done. Once I run the Python analyze, it used to initialize the server. That Notion client also got initialized. Then we are running MCP server for analysis. Till here we conclude we have bought up MCP servers, and now we are ready to put the question to the prompt. How the question would be prompt? Since we have integrated the cloud, we'll be going to the cloud desktop application, and I put here, please analyze my PR. So given the PR, it first integrates, it use MCP integration done along with the cloud LLM. It goes to GitHub. It was failed to get here. So if you see here, based on the limited information, there was some hiccups, but post that I again tried, so here it was able to get the context right. If you see for PR2, here I'll fetch, it's using the MCP, is getting the context, then it's going to the GitHub, getting the response based on that context determination, or we can interchangeably say MCP is used to determine the context. So based on that, it got the context, got the data from GitHub, and here it is the complete analysis. This part of PR analysis typo was there in a Google statement that I mentioned the PR detail. Then I didn't mention the, it mentioned the status. All this is a metadata in the first API call. Then it got the key observation and suggestions. And even it's suggesting the fix. If you see this particular PR, you can actually see this is how it is, the content. The description for document PR. If you see here, what is the recommendation we have? So here it says there is a PR title, Google Doc example. This is something I probably had modified later on. These are multiple attempts I did here, if you see. Then I changed different, then I deliberately made Google here. Then based on that, it's giving all the predictions, something is missing, what else can be done. All this is being possible simply by making a simple code change of nothing but just defining the context here. This Notion page, and for MCP, this is the only thing I had to do. So going further, in the next session, we'll be integrating more external tools. Here we have one tool, one for Notion, one for that. We'll be extending this example to use other external sources. I'll be sharing the GitHub link below the video at our list. Thanks for being there. Thanks for your time. I'll conclude the session here. Thanks. Thank you.